This is a Women in Construction seminar discussion. It's fairly informal, ladies. And this is with Julie Robinson. She is the VP of Construction Canada. We were connected through LinkedIn, and I reached out to her because this is a passion project of mine. And I'm close to about 8,500 people on my LinkedIn, and I would say about 90 to 95% of those individuals come from construction. And it was like pulling teeth to find somebody who was a woman who had the background of 20 plus years. That actually, I think, was alarming on its own when I went to go do my search to find individuals to interview. So Julie, thank you for volunteering your time and being here for us. I like to kind of share with everyone a little bit of the statistics about women in construction. And just so everyone knows, this is different from different areas in the world, but predominantly these are generally the numbers we're looking at. So the percentage of women in construction has hovered somewhere between 9 and 10% since 1996. This is North America. So this number globally represented in 2018 is closer to 3.4, which I know I've heard around these numbers at different events and different organizations that I'm part of. So as you can see, 3.4% of women globally represented in construction is an incredibly small number. I do think I was with OSET's Women in Construction function that they were talking about, and engineers, they seem to be in the Canadian area at 17%, I think, maybe in and around the 17%. So in that particular avenue and regard, we seem to be doing better, but obviously that's still a long cry away from an equal ratio of people in this field. So this is just some data that I've picked up. These were some of the other areas that I saw that were interesting. So building inspectors, 14%, and then it goes even to the trades-based, which we'll talk about trades-based roles in a little bit, but everything from carpenters to electricians, it was incredibly low in that regard. And we'll have that conversation about that. I did notice the percentage of women in construction management, project management was bigger and is growing. And on this call, including my experiences, so I do recruitment in the construction industry, I will have to say that is a growing trend of women in project management. I'm starting to find a lot more women are getting involved at the project coordinator level and growing into project management, more so than I see them obviously in site super, site work, even in engineering or on any of the trades. So that seems to be a niche area where women are gravitating towards. On this call, we can talk about the potential reasons for women not participating in construction or why they're not gravitating towards construction. So here are a couple of points that I pulled out. These are more so my opinion. Traditionally, it's a male-dominated industry. We all know that. Since there are more men in the field and offices, women can find themselves in intimidating or potential situations for harassment. You hear the stories, we see the stigma around this. Again, we're going to be talking about our experiences as women in construction. The one thing that is not just women, but it's men, so young individuals, is the shift towards technology. So this idea of manual labor, this idea of physical work that is stigmatized or related to construction, I think is pulling a lot of men and women away from the construction industry. I do think it's wrong, and I think it's a wrong persona of what construction has to offer, but it is definitely a shift that we are seeing. So, Julie, now that I've kind of gotten some general facts, I want this to be about you and your experiences. Can you tell me, just give me a brief intro, a brief bio of yourself? I know I had it out there, but just run me through the beginning.
Okay. I've been in the industry here in Toronto for 18 years, primarily in the multifamily mixed-use asset class, but my career started in Jamaica. I am an engineer by training, civil engineering, and grew up in Jamaica and had every intention of staying in Jamaica for the rest of my life, but didn't turn out to be the path, and no regrets. I go back a lot, but I've been living in Toronto now for close to 20 years, and started out in Jamaica. I was more on the consulting side, but there was also a significant element of project management that was involved with that, just by virtue of the roles in Jamaica, certainly in the construction industry, being less defined and boxed as they are here. And so when I made the move to Canada, and particularly Toronto, I decided that with the project management that I was involved with in Jamaica, I thought, well, I really enjoyed that. I think a bit more than sitting at the desk as much as I did with the design components. So I made the transition over to the construction management side, and started with a construction management firm, Saddlebrook Management Consultants. Was there for 2.5 years, moved on to Canderel. Sarah Coder, who's on the call, is with Canderel. I know her from there. So I was there for close to 13 years. And then most recently, I moved over to Hines. All of these are, but for Saddlebrook, which is a construction manager, I've worked since then for developers, working on both the traditional development approval side as well as construction management right through to registration of condominiums. So the full gamut. So it's been quite a journey, and a very, very exciting, stressful, rewarding, frustrating journey, but most of all rewarding.
Oh, that's wonderful. So I'm going to bring it back to the beginning. So you're in Jamaica at this point in time of your life. I mean, you're growing up in Jamaica, and what moved you towards engineering? Like that must have been a thought process that you were obviously oriented towards a way of thinking, and this is the schooling, this is the type of education you're going to commit to. What was that journey so early on in your schooling career?
Yeah, well, when I went to high school in Jamaica, there are basically two streams that you have to follow at a certain point, and we go by forms. We don't go by grades, but I think it translates to about grade 9. You have to make a decision in the stream you're going in, and it's either called the art stream or the sciences stream. So unfortunately, I really actually still love art, and I was quite good at art. I wasn't able to follow that path because my mom just thought that probably wasn't the best choice from a career perspective. So I ended up going along the sciences path. And no, it's an interesting question because most of my friends in high school were looking at the traditional, becoming a doctor or veterinarian, some kind of medicine type thing. Some maybe were wanting to work in a laboratory. I actually didn't have any friends who wanted to pursue engineering. So it really wasn't on my radar originally, but I did have some influences in my life at that time, being around people who were on construction sites, mainly expats actually coming to Jamaica to do work. And I saw what they were involved in, and it really excited me. And I thought, oh, well, okay, so I'm in the sciences stream. The whole doctor thing really didn't excite me. I felt like I might end up going down that path, but it wasn't something that excited me. And then just through the influence of these people, I really thought, like, the light bulb came on, and I thought, I really think I'm going to enjoy this.
That's so interesting that you said that these expats were the ones that influenced you. I have this conversation quite frequently with organizations on, how do we bring awareness to youth who are making these decisions to transition into post-secondary? The predominant way that young individuals think about construction as a career is because they know and they have been influenced by family or friends who are already in the industry. So that's so interesting. You just completely proved that point.
Yes.
Yeah. So I love that. Thank you. I personally don't think that's enough to get the people that we need, the volume of people that we need in the North American industry. But it's so great to know that, these influences are coming in and making, young individuals like yourself back then having these decisions like, oh, they've got a great career. I see this great career, and then moving yourself towards. So when you went to post-secondary, you're now going towards engineering. Can you tell me about your environment? Who was in your class? Who was teaching these classes? Mostly what I'm looking for, and it's a bit of a guided question, I'm trying to see if you were in your element as a female in an engineering classroom.
No, it's an easy no. Well, first of all, in the first year of engineering, it's it's actually just a bit of a weeding out process. So it ends up being 200 students in a massive lecture theater, kids at the back playing dominoes, playing cards, and anybody who's really interested is in the first 20 rows. So it was just a hodgepodge of a lot of students. There were probably, if I was going to guess a percentage, maybe 20% were female.
Okay.
So it didn't feel that strange or odd at that time, but we definitely were in the minority, but at least it was a 20% minority. The lecturers were all male. There was no female lecturer. The deans of every sub-faculty and faculty department was male. And all the tutors were male. So immediately you get into this environment and you realize the 20% of us are feeling a bit like things are stacked up against us. I didn't really have a lot of time, to be honest with you, to focus on that because the first year is truly a weeding out process. So it was just head down, focus, get through this year because it truly is set up. I don't want to sound too dramatic, but I feel like it's set up to make you feel it's 10 courses and you have to pass 9. And that's just a very stressful process to get through that first year. So I think I was in a bit of a blur in the first year, but the second year and third year, it became even more obvious to me that I was in the minority. By the time I got to the second year and you start streaming into civil or electrical or industrial, there were 3 other girls besides me in a class of probably 60.
Wow.
So it became even more apparent there that this was not the normal process for a young woman, certainly in the university I was attending. And it was a real challenge dealing with some of the tutors because misogyny is alive and well. It was alive and well then, it's alive and well now. And there were definite moments where I really struggled with some of the lectures I had. I was very feisty in those days, so I just didn't put up with it, frankly, and I asserted myself. But I was really turned off by it and put off by it, but I was still determined nonetheless to get through it because I really wanted to do it. And as I got more and more into the course, I realized I was actually pretty good at what I was doing. And I realized I was a lot better than a lot of the guys. So I stopped after a while focusing on the fact that I was in such a minority and focusing on rising to the top.
Amazing. You've now obviously completed your schooling and you're moving on to your first career. What does that look like, this transition into the construction industry, and what does that transition look like for this young woman who's breaking into this field in Jamaica? I'm assuming your first in Jamaica. Yes.
So actually, it was actually a good first start because we actually had, while I was in my final year, we had a few organizations come down to university and interview some of us for jobs even before we returned to Jamaica. And I got offered a job before I even left university. So I felt really good about that. And I felt really good about beating the other guys at this really great chance. So that was really good for my ego. And got into working for a statutory body, which is kind of like an NGO, designing. And I actually really didn't enjoy it, if I'm really honest with myself. The environment was very slow, very bureaucratic. And I was really actually disappointed because I was so proud of myself for landing this great job, but then just felt very uninspired very quickly. And I, it's a tough decision as a young person. I was, looking after myself. Most of my immediate family had left Jamaica by then. So I was really on my own. It's not like I could just go sleep on the couch and mom's paying the mortgage. So it was really a tough decision as to whether I stay in this job and maybe figure out that I can adapt to this culture, or do I just go and find something else that I think will be more enjoyable to me. And I decided that I'd spent too much time, too much hard work getting to where I was to settle. So I didn't stay there very long. I stayed there for about 1.5 years, made a move, and then just started to just completely enjoy my job and never looked back. I was so happy to have made the change and been able to practice what I learned once I left
And
there.
so what was the next change? Like you obviously now know the career path that you want to go down. What's that next transition?
So still on the design side,
Yeah.
but I went to work for a multidisciplinary firm. So they had architects, structural engineers, quantity surveyors, which in Canada most people call cost consultants, but there's a lot deeper element to being a quantity surveyor. So it was a truly mixed
My husband's a quantity
disciplinary
surveyor.
firm. Okay, so you know.
I know.
Yes. So I ended up being in an environment where I was exposed to different elements of what engineering and construction and management was about. And it was quite a small firm, 3 partners, and the engineering partner naturally took me under his wing. And he, to this day, is probably the person that impacted my life and my career the most. I just learned so much from him. I joke all the time, even now, when people if they bring me a letter and they say, oh, I want to send this out, and I edit it a bit, and I always laugh because I remember he used to just mark my letters up, strike blue ink through my letters, changing up. And I was never offended by it, because every time I read what he wrote, it was so much better than what I wrote. So he was a brilliant engineer, brilliant communicator. And for everybody who's on the call, who's in our industry, they know that communication is a critical part of this business. So I ended up doing a lot of the engineering design under him, but then being in that firm, I ended up also working with some of the architects in the firm and getting more into the project management side of things, and even doing work on some other Caribbean islands. So I ended up working on such a wide facet and variety of projects. It was so rewarding. I touched almost every type of project I could have touched working at that firm. It was very rewarding. I was there for
challenged.
Yeah, I worked there for 10 years. Yeah.
Wow. And you're talking, it's a smaller firm. So were there other women in the office that you could connect with, or that you could share those experiences with, or not so much at that time?
No, again.
Okay. Oh, so were you the only woman in the office?
Well, I mean, there were 3 admin assistants. We had a receptionist. And in Jamaica, it's very old school. So we had a lady who looked after all of us and would bring us coffee or tea. And yeah, those were the only women in the office. There were no other professionals, just me. And by this time, I was so used to it. I just thought, well, this is the life I'm about to pursue.
Yeah. And, I find that's really interesting. So I've had this mentor conversation, and with the other women that I brought onto these calls, it's always been the same thing. They've had a male mentor who was, either a partner or a director, someone senior within the firm. And I wonder if this would be your case as well. They did address that you are a woman in a male field. And that was part of the mentorship process, was not that I'm going to protect you against what's happening, but I'm going to let you know the forces that be that are on site, that are with the other, consultants, and we're going to learn how to navigate that together. So did you guys ever talk about that? Like, was it, because I can see that being kind of awkward on the first part, but necessary?
No, we never spoke about it. I didn't speak about it with any of the partners, actually. And that's probably an unfortunate opportunity that they missed. I feel it may just be them not really extending their thought into what it meant for me being in that environment. I bet if I was talking to them now, they might have regrets about not having had that conversation with me. But I would say 2 of the partners, without being explicitly communicating with me on that level, were very supportive. So I never felt, whereas they didn't really help me navigate that challenge, and I did have some really horrible experiences, I always knew they had my back. So it wasn't so explicit, but they were very supportive of me.
Well, and that was going to be my next question. So you go where you're comfortable. What are some of the barriers or situations that you have faced? Because you were there for 10 years. What were those situations and those barriers that you faced that were coming from the outside office environments?
Well, it has a few challenges with it, because I was a woman. a minority in Jamaica, visibly, and very young in my career. So I had a few things going against me that all kind of rolled together to put me at a disadvantage in a few instances. And then on the flip side, kind of funny, I guess, to me, I was on a construction site one time, and it was a very large site for a big telecommunications firm, and I was a field engineer. And there were a lot of workmen walking out and about the site. And one of them just came up and said he wanted to marry me. I don't think he would have said that if it was my male colleague, but this
Right.
kind of stuff that just comes out of somebody's mouth. So that kind of thing, I just take that as humor, but the experiences I had with some of those contractors where I was spoken down to, it was very hurtful. I did cry one time, not in front of the person, but I did go home and cry because I felt very alone and very unsupported. But through all of that, with what I wanted to do and how much joy I took out of my job, I just kind of pulled my bootstraps up. And I would say there were too many other good experiences with contractors to allow those, 2 or 3 experiences to get me down. And I'm just not that type of person anyway. I don't give up very easily.
No, you don't seem like you do. Like you said, you're feisty. So it sounds like you've had these amazing opportunities. And one of my questions always is barriers. Like, what barriers did you face as a woman in this industry? But aside from, a couple of these instances, you honestly had some great opportunities. So, for anyone on this call who's listening, what I would like to advocate for is, and I actually just put a post up today about this, is I think really good employers don't care about your gender. They just want to know you are a good employee, that you are going to get the job done to the best of your knowledge and your abilities. They want to know that you're putting your best foot forward, and they will support that if they're a good employer. And it sounds like you found a great employer who's willing to do that. And like you said, didn't even bring up the gender issue, even though you were the only female technical individual in this office, which is just incredible. But you had all the opportunities because you were driven, you were ambitious, you went for it, and took on the mentor that helped you grow. And I think a lot of women get caught up, and I'm not saying everyone, but I do have people in conversation say, well, if you're female in construction, you should have a female mentor. And I don't necessarily think that's true, because if you can get over some of those bad situations, knowing that 80%, if not more, of the situations are great, who cares who your mentor is, as long as they're mentoring you and giving you great information and great knowledge and wisdom. So I don't think you need a female mentor, although I think that transition and that ability to maybe, instead of going home and crying alone and feeling not supported, you could go to somebody and say, this happened to me. And they can say, you know what, I completely empathize, that happened to me too. Because like you said, it probably never happened to one of your male colleagues that a male worker came up and said, will you marry me, right? It probably never happened.
Probably not.
How many women has that happened to? And you're dressed for the job. You've got the paperwork. You're there for a meeting. It's almost, in my opinion, and if that happened to me, I would be embarrassed. Like I know how I get, and it would completely rattle my confidence. Like, I can see myself in your shoes walking down that hallway or outside and being like, totally, like, I got this meeting, I know my business, and someone saying something like that, and it would rattle me, because it would then point out, you don't belong here, right? Like, that to me, I like to put on this big persona that I'm so, I have a big shell or a thick skin, and at the end of the day, it just takes that one little poke, right?
Right.
So yeah, so I want to get to more of your now career, and in the last couple of years, it looks like you yourself have been in management positions, obviously, different team sizes. Can you tell me a little bit about the maybe last 5 to 10 years of your career in management, and what you've been doing in management?
Yeah, I actually spent most of that time on one massive project, which is an 80-story building at Young and Girard, and that was when I was at Canderel. And I was at Canderel for quite a while, for for a few years before I started that project, did a couple of other very tall high-rise building projects. But in terms of management, I didn't have a big team. I would say in the last, when I was dealing with Aura, I was dealing more on the development management side, but also working with the construction manager to deliver some of the construction management scope. So I didn't have a massive team under me, but I had an assistant project manager, and I had started out with 3 coordinators, ended up down to 1. So the team would end up being around maybe 4 to 6 people. I would say the split was probably 50-50 men and women. I don't think I did that intentionally. I don't know if I did that subconsciously. I really have thought about that quite a bit. What made me hire some of the people I hired. And I really haven't come to the conclusion as to why I hired so many women. But I do know, even if there was some subconscious need that I felt to support other women coming up through the industry, I'm also a very serious taskmaster. So whether it's a man or a woman, if I made the hire and it's a woman and she's really not performing, then I'm going to have to try and bring that person up and work to bring that person up. And if it's not working, we're going to have to part ways. So my style was very uniform, whether it's a man or a woman, but I did notice I hired quite a few women. And I'm kind of happy that I did, but like I said, I haven't settled on why I did.
Could have been subconscious. That would be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
To do a deep dive and find out why you hired the people you hired, knowing what your background is.
Yeah. And I would say, in terms of my management style, I'm a very goal-oriented, goal-focused person. You have to be in this business because every day that goes by without a decision being made or movement being made, there's a problem with the schedule, there's going to be a problem with the budget. So I'm very goal-oriented, very goal-focused. And I impart that on the people who work for me and who work with me. I'm also I'm a complete sharer of information. As much as I can help somebody grow in their career, it makes me feel better about myself because of that story I told you about my own mentor. He gave me everything. He never held back. He taught me everything he could teach me. And I always felt instinctively to do the same thing. So everyone that worked with me or for me, I always told them what I learned, how I thought they should approach something. It's coming from a place of experience and trying to help them develop their careers. And I would set very specific goals, and the goals need to be met. We'll agree the target so that you're part of the process. But if you miss a target, we need to understand why you've missed the target. Because as I said, the implications are huge. And if you're not hitting your targets, then you're not really developing your career the way you want to be.
Right. Did you notice differences between how the women achieved their targets versus how the men achieved their targets? Was there different personality or different characteristic traits that allowed them to get to that finish line per target?
I would say yes. I mean, I have to caveat that with the fact that it's such a small group that we're talking about. And is this something that can translate over a broader group? I don't know. But there was this distinct difference between how the women I worked with approached things and performed compared to the men that I worked with. And I would say consistently the women, and I don't know if this has something to do with them working with me. I really don't know what would have driven this, but I always found that the women were extremely hard and focused workers. I always found that, and that could be part of the reason I kept hiring women. I don't know, but I had a really good experience with all the women that I hired. And even when they came in, there was one young lady who worked for me. She had a degree in, I don't even remember what it was. It was something like geology or something. It really wasn't directly transferable. And I only got her by default because she was working in a different department at Canderel. They didn't need her there, and I was told to take her on. So I'm like, okay. And she came over, and she was so open to learning. And every time I took her through a process, and like I said, I share everything. I really don't just let people figure it out. I'll explain to them how I work through things. Here's how I would do it. If you find a way to improve it, that's fine. And I would find every time she came back to me to do that same task, she got better and better at it. And to me, that was about her attitude and her approach to her career. And I found the woman much more driven. And I always found them hitting the 100% target that I set, whereas some of the guys that work for me would hit the 95. And I would say to them, you have not helped me at all because you've got 95%. I need you to get to 100%. So now I've relied on the fact that you've got to 100. We've lost all this time. And now I have to pick up this 5%. And I don't know where you left the 95%.
Right.
I found that was a consistent issue with the guys I was had working for me. And I gave both sets my style is exactly the same. Man and woman is exactly the same. So I would say my experience with the woman was, I felt like I could rely on them more at the end of the day, get to that 100%. And each time I was able to pull myself away from micromanaging because I could see that they were really coming into their own.
Right. And so when you have to go back and say, like, look, you did not hit your 100% target. Like you just said, I kind of have to pick up this 5%, and it's not like it's 5% is small. It's where did it end up? And we need to complete this because the implications are so big at the back end. What is the feedback, or how did they receive that sort of critique?
More like a deer in headlights, I guess. I would say because I was consistent, like I said, with everyone. So the response, I wouldn't say, I didn't feel the response had anything to do with me being a woman, giving them criticism and asking them to, refocus and understand the implications of not hitting the mark. But I, having said that, there was one particular guy who worked for me, and he really struggled taking instructions from me. He really, really struggled.
Wow.
And it got to the point that the challenge I had with him was that he wasn't actually employed to my company because I was working in the construction manager's office, helping them deal with everything that construction management involves. And so he was assigned to me. So he actually wasn't a direct employee of mine, but he was assigned to me. And he really struggled to take instructions. And it got to the point where he made some critical errors that really, really harmed the project. And I just decided I would ignore him. So because I wasn't able to release him, I just decided that I would not give him any more work. So his arrogance started to kind of come down a few notches, and he would come to my office and ask me if I had anything else for him. And I'd say, no, I actually don't. And then he'd come back and say, can I help with that? No, you can't. I don't need any help. And it's not the way I wanted to deal with it, but I was so angry at him because I knew it was about the gender. It had taken too long for me to figure out what was going on, but he had a challenge. He had a problem with the female authority that I brought to him.
Wow.
And I just decided that my solution was I just wouldn't use him. And what ended up happening to him as a result, and he called it on himself, he got laid off. So that was my response to a bad situation. But I would say he was an anomaly. I didn't encounter that too much, to be honest.
Right. And so I guess, you always hear about the male ego, and you always hear about male ego. Not that you always hear about it, but there's the male ego in construction. And so you're giving this criticism to these gentlemen, you're giving criticism, constructive criticism to these women as well. How is the differences between them receiving it? So, and the way that I'm seeing this is, and this is just my thought process, because I've been in this seat before where I've had to give constructive criticism to a male on a site, just from my experiences when I was in construction management. And the response that you get can be so fueled and back up, and all of a sudden relationships shut down. So I'm wondering, in the management position, not just even with your team, but with your trades or your other consultants that you have to work with, when you're as a female in a position or authority position, how are you giving this constructive criticism, knowing that they're either men or women, there's these different egos that you have to kind of tiptoe around? And do you see the differences between men and women and their egos?
So that's actually a really good question. And I think the answer might surprise anybody who's not been in the industry for too many years yet. But my experience, whether it's dealing with someone in the office or for all the times I've been on site, going to site meetings, dealing with guys on the slab, solving problems at the drawing table in the construction office, it very quickly becomes irrelevant that I'm a woman, very quickly. And I want to, if there's one thing I want to tell young women, just starting out in this industry, this is not unique to me. If you lead with your brain, because all of us on this call have to remember that whether you're still in university or college or you're new in your career, you have to remember how many guys, and Colin, I see there's a guy on the call, so I'm not bashing guys, but we're here talking about women, so I appreciate him being here. But we need to appreciate that we were in environments, probably in university or college, where we were smarter than a lot of these guys. And that's because we are just who we are. That's our brains are set up to be who we are. And we're successful because of what our brains are, not because we have long hair and our physiques are different. So my experience has been very positive since I've been here. Within every time I went on a new construction site, you would get a couple of sideways glances just because, yes, you are different. But as soon as you start communicating with any of these men, mostly men and women, you're respectful, you're coming from a place of knowledge, you're coming up from a place of problem solving, and you're coming from a place of helping them move the project forward. Within, I would say, 2 meetings, it is completely irrelevant that you're actually different. So I have not had a bad experience. I've had only positive experience. And the probably the icing on the cake for that is there are always some very uncomfortable, tense moments on site. And frankly, as a woman, with the softness that we can impart in a conversation, the understanding that we can put into communication in a difficult situation, sometimes that can turn that conversation, dial it down, just because we have a different way of communicating in a stressful situation. So I would say I've found very little difference, and I've actually found it to be an advantage sometimes to be a woman on site.
That is so funny. That's my next question. What qualities of being a female do you find helps you get through tough situations or different situations typically? And I don't want to sit here and say like all females are the same, but typical, stereotypical female traits do you feel you can bring to these sites, like you just said, and kind of help the site or help a situation that is predominantly male driven?
Yeah, I would say not being instinctively confrontational, not instinctively wanting to show that you're the tougher person. And I think generally, one of a pretty common female trait is wanting to solve problems such that nobody's really harmed in the process, that nobody really comes out a terrible loser. So I think being able to collaborate and being able to understand the other side, having some amount of empathy and understanding, being willing to listen, not being arrogant, not wanting to always win, not always wanting to be on top. That always goes across well. And I think that goes across well to everybody, because construction is stressful. There are always problems. There are always problems nobody saw coming. And a lot of times the solutions aren't always obvious. And everybody's nervous they're going to get hurt in the process of finding that solution. So I would say just maintaining composure, being solution-oriented, not feeling like you have to be arrogant or tough. You have to be tough, but when I say tough, just tough for toughness' sake, it's not necessary. People will appreciate that you're understanding their perspective and coming at it from just a very calm, solution-oriented perspective. The fighting doesn't work. Guys throwing their hard hats across the trailer, I've seen it too many times. and it does nothing. The guy throws his hard hat across the trailer, storms out, and the meeting's over. What happened? Where does that solve anything? So then now you have to regroup and get the guy who threw his hard hat across the trailer to come to a meeting the next day. And then you have a calm conversation, and within probably half hour, the problem was solved. So yeah, hard hat throwing, no.
No. That should be your next logo. It's just like an X through a hard hat.
Yeah. No hard hat throwing.
So let's go to sort of more of the happy parts of construction. For you, what's the most rewarding part of construction?
I would say that first building inspection, that's going really well. It is such a joy. It's such a relief. It's taken so much to get to this point that when you have that first building inspection, whether it's a fire department or buildings, and everything's going well and everybody tips their hat and says, you'll get your certificate tomorrow. It's that feeling of delivering exactly what you were brought on to deliver. And, you know, for the companies I've worked for, fortunately, they've delivered great products. I've always been proud of what we've built. It's usually pretty high standard. So delivering it and basically giving the owner who's put millions and millions of dollars into something at risk and delivering what you told him or her you would is so satisfying.
That's amazing. That's it's so interesting at the end of all these conversations when I ask that question where everyone has a different variation of basically the same thing. And it's just that, here you go, look how beautiful it is.
Yeah.
Which
Absolutely.
is, I think, the beauty of construction overall is you can touch and feel the product that's taken so long, and it shelters people. It's their home. It's so personal to this individual or multiple individuals of you know, these residents. So what are you hoping, because we are coming to the end of the call, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but what are you hoping to see in terms of gender and gender diversification in construction? What are you hoping to see for the next few years to come?
I think since I went to university, I think there are more and more young women doing engineering courses or technical based courses. And I really want to see them owning their knowledge, owning their talent, and coming into the industry. This industry is talent starved. It is completely talent starved. There are a lot of resumes out there, but not all of the resumes are worth reading.
Right.
So there is such a great opportunity for women who really feel like this could be something they're passionate about, because whether it's construction or, you know, being a lawyer or anything else, if you don't have a passion for what you do, it's going to be a very painful, long working experience. So if young women feel like they could have a passion for this and really think they could get some real joy and satisfaction out of it, I'd love to see more women coming into it, because as I mentioned to you before, I've hired a lot of women. Many of them have moved up in their careers. They're going to be stars and are on their way to being stars. And it's because they listen, they learn, they've got great experience. The opportunities are fantastic. So I want to see more women feeling confident in themselves of coming into this industry, because it really has nothing to do with being a woman or a man. Nothing. It has to do with how you lead with your brain, how you respond to people, how you communicate, and being a problem solver. Women are not procrastinators, and that's one of the big advantages women have. They do not procrastinate. When something's in front of them, they may be terrified for a moment that there's a problem, but then they'll dive right in. So you should use that. That is actually one of the traits I should have mentioned. That is a trait I see in women.
Right. And it's so interesting that you said, you know, the industry is talent starved, and for anyone on this call who's in employment or around the ability of a hiring manager, it blows my mind that we complain as a industry that we are talent starved and there's no people out there. Yet I think globally the female population is like 60%. Like there's more females than there are men. And so I remember I was at a structural steel association, like a general meeting, and I was, you know, I gave these talks to let them know about not just women in construction, about the talent shortages. And it dawned on me in a room of 50 people, I was the only female. And I pointed it out very, very pointedly, said, you cannot complain when there's 50 men in this room, one female. I'm not really even in this industry at that point, or what I do. If you're not hiring from 60% of the other side of the population, you can't complain about it then. If
Absolutely.
you entered that market, if you haven't reached out to that market, that's on you, right? And so I agree. Women, once we get more awareness that women are welcomed into this industry, which means we need industry to welcome them.
Yeah.
Then we're going to have some incredible talent out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and women make phenomenal. If anyone again is a hiring manager, most of the women that I put forward that are hired, I get great testimonials back on, because we are very organized. We are not procrastinators, as you just said, and we're so grateful for the opportunity to be in this field that I feel like that drive and that ambition, it's almost like it's in us to put it forward, because we know that we want to show you what we have to offer. So I find I get some of the best reviews from some of my female project managers and project coordinators that I put forward.
That's great.
Really, really well. But yeah, so I mean, this is going to be the end of our call. Do you have anything else that you wanted to add before we go to questions and answers?
No, I would just like to say to all the women on the call, just, when you're out looking for jobs, or if you're in a job that you're frustrated by, there are some really great firms in our industry that are very supportive of women. Look out for those. And treat yourself and respect yourself enough to find those firms. If you're in a firm where you really feel that you're being treated differently because you're a woman, don't stay. It's not worth it. You'll never get where you want to go. You'll be frustrated. So look out for the ones that support women, because even if they, supporting women just means not treating them differently. And there are a lot of them out there.
No, great. And I think that's a phenomenal point to make. You're worth more than that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm going to open up the floor. Everyone has control of their own mics. So if you have any questions that you want to put forward to Julie, you're more than welcome to unmute yourself and ask the question. If you want to ask me a question, same thing. So yeah, if anyone had any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself or go into the chat box below.
Hi, my name is Shanair Johnson. I'm Trinidadian, so we're neighbors.
Hi.
Hi. The first thing I wanted to say was thank you, Agnes, for, I guess, creating a forum for people like us who have, common interests like this. And particularly for someone like me, because I'm interested in this. And it's good that this is here for us to express, and, so just thank you. To Julie, thank you for sharing your story, because I can relate on some levels with having been schooled in the Caribbean as well. So essentially, your story has really encouraged me, because I have only recently migrated last year. And I'm really thinking about how to enter the construction field. Now that I've had my son, I'm ready to go back to the workplace. And so I wanted to ask, what advice did you have for someone like me who is fairly new, a newcomer, but I have 7 years of experience as a project manager in Trinidad. But coming over here, the transition is not gonna, I have to do something to bridge that gap. And so what would your advice be for someone like me?
So you are living what my life was when I came over here. So I'm going to give you the exact advice I gave myself, and it worked out well. Use your connections if you have any, and try and make connections with anybody in the industry that you can. So you should reach out to me and reach out to anybody you can. Make sure you understand, and I have a feeling, Shanair, just from how you speak, you will understand this, but have an understanding that you're starting over. So it was similar to me. You were at a certain position in your career in Trinidad, and I can appreciate, 7 years would mean, that you've done quite a bit. You have to accept you're starting over. And that's a first acknowledgement. And I find other people who came over around the same time as me, some people struggle with that. And if you don't have that acknowledgement, you're already fighting yourself. Nobody cares what we've done until we got here. So we're basically starting off at ground zero. So acknowledging that is the first thing. It's not a bad acknowledgement because that means you now know how you're going to target getting in. And I would suggest approaching construction management firms that are really busy, and put yourself forward as a coordinator. It's going to be such a kind of more rudimentary task than what you're accustomed to, but you will learn so much about the industry that you just don't know because you haven't worked here. So you'll be exposed to so many things. And as I said to Sarah, who's worked with me for a while, the reason I can train people is because I started at the bottom. I was a coordinator. I know everything it takes. I know the challenges of being a coordinator. I know what the focuses should be of a coordinator. Try and get your foot in the door as a coordinator. You can even try and get your foot in the door working on a site. Even as a site clerk, you will learn so much. And because I know who you are, because you're a Caribbean woman, they're going to immediately depend on you within 2 months of being there, and you're going to rise to the top. Trust me on that.
I have to completely back up what she's saying. I deal a lot with new immigrants coming to the country and placing them, and the acknowledgement that you're going to be starting from a completely different position or a position you've already done. It does not mean that you're going to stay there. If you were a good project manager in Trinidad, and you know that you inherently have that skill set, just because you're starting off as a project coordinator, just think of it as a new start to shining off your shoes and getting on site and showing them what you can do and killing it, and then going back to being a project manager. It might take you 1 year, 2 years. That's really dependent on you. But then now you're a project manager in your new country, in your new city, in basically what is a booming marketplace. So, you know, that one step back is really ultimately going to lead you to 5 steps forward. Yeah. So,
and Shanier, there's one thing I would mention to you as well. When you go for your interviews, don't shy away from the fact that you don't have Canadian experience, because they know you don't.
Yeah.
So acknowledge it and say, I've done all of these things. I don't have very much Canadian experience, but I can assure you, if I'm doing something that I'm not that familiar with, I will spend the extra time, I'll spend the extra hours, I will get it done. Make sure, because in my first interview, I just tackled it head on. And I said, I may not have the full knowledge of how everything works here, but I can assure you that I will be putting in the extra hours, and it will be done, and it will be done properly. And just don't even shy away from it.
no, I agree. Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate everyone taking the time to come out to this conversation. Like I said, we are recording, so I'm going to be putting this up on the website, which is www.nextgenprofessional.com. You'll see a lot of resources there. For other individuals on this call who's looking to explore different options or different skill sets, just so you know, we have other classes. You can look on the same website, but it's //webinars. We do skills building as well as profile updating, so how that looks. So that would be a phenomenal class for you to come into. They're free. I love doing this as a passion project to help people expedite their skill set, but we can give you resources on how to build your LinkedIn profile, on how to network, like Julie was saying, how to get your hands on other individuals and network and do it properly so you're coming across as professional and authentic, as well as building your resume so it reflects what the Canadian industry is looking for. We will also give you a lot of information. Like I'm talking like you get like 20 plus websites on different free or relatively inexpensive certification programs you can get, whether it's like a lot of people here use Procore. So the Procore certification will walk you through that. It's free. We'll walk you through Primavera, so scheduling, risk management, those. I want to give everyone what they can. So when you're in this time where you're ramping up, trying to get your resume out the door, at least your resume is going to be on the top of everyone's sheet because they're like, holy, look what she has, right? And then you're coming in saying, well, I'm going to be a coordinator, but I came in with, 10 certifications, right? So that's a really great class. And I think we're hosting one at the end of June. So check our calendar online. Okay. So thank you, everyone. If you have any other questions, please let us know. But I'm going to end the call. I just want to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you so much for making it on. Oh, hi, Sarah. Look at that. Thank you guys so much for making it on the call, and definitely feel free to share the video with other women that you might know, or just with your network in general, because we're going to be trying to reach as many men as well. So thank you, Julie.
You're welcome.
Thank you. You gave us a very honest reflection.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
bye, everyone.
Guys. Have a good one.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.